everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the 64 Neighborhood Lending Libraries, a behind-the-scenes look at literary placemaking discussion between Maritza Rubio and Madeline Spencer. I'd like to introduce you both for our discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your role in the community and what you do, and about how this idea for these lending libraries came about.
You start, Maritza.
Sure. So I started Makara Center for the Arts, which is a nonprofit library and community arts center in Santa Ana back in January 2016. And it took us a while to find a physical space for our library collection. And in time, in 2016, we started doing book clubs and just kind of looking at different ways to develop more access to free literature. That really is our mission, is to provide access to arts and culture in Santa Ana through workshops, public performances, and multimedia resources. And we were so lucky that at the very beginning, we applied for an impact grant from the Little Free Library organization. And at the time I was working at Illumination Foundation, and they had a children's resource center right by the Santa Ana Public Library, the main public library, just down the street on Ross. And we were awarded this grant, which was the 50,000th Little Free Library in the world. It was super exciting. And we had, founder came out, Todd Bull, rest in peace. He was so dynamic, and he really took the time to read to the kids that were there. And we made this big ceremony of opening it up, and it had butterflies and flowers, and it was just super cool to see that being put in this landmark, 50,000 Little Free Library. Now it's, it's past 100,000. But at the time, at the end of 2016, it was really exciting. So that's one of the ways that we were able to start kind of getting the books out there, with the understanding when you have these lending libraries, these static sites, that the books go in and they go out and they may not come back. And that's kind of what we want. Even when we opened up our brick and mortar space on Main Street, right by Pop's Cafe, we opened up in May of 2017, and it was the same thing. We just had rows and books, and with the idea that, we really love these books and we want people to read them, and they may not come back, and that's okay. Just to summarize what we've been doing with Makara since, we closed our doors last June, just due to the pandemic. And we've then transitioned now to Makara by mail. So we still offer library services with a very small collection of books, and send them out with a prepaid envelope. Anyone in Santa Ana can sign up for a free library card. Anyone in the United States can sign up for a small fee. And it's the same idea, just get these books out.
And for me, I was so excited, and I think it was right after the first Boca that her center opened, and it was so exciting to see already a spot. And I'm so curious, from what you just said, where was your library located, Maritza?
811 North Main Street.
Okay, so and I recently, at the beginning of COVID in 2020, I actually was in Portland, Oregon, and I noticed that every single neighborhood had these amazing little lending libraries that were very diverse. Like, somebody would have a log outside of their house that had been carved into a lending library, or you'd go and somebody had created a clay display. So they were so unique, and they were in every single neighborhood. And I realized, I'm like, wow. And I mean, I thought about the fact, and we've always kind of lamented the fact that there's only one main library in Santa Ana. And of course there's the New Hope Library. So there's two, but I had heard of other cities that have 16 libraries, or Anaheim having 10 libraries. And I was like, we have so many people and so few books, not just books, but places that folks can just access this amazing literature. And I have to say that I was so excited in the article that came out that it said Maritza is going to be actually putting in books that are written by authors of color that can actually help the youth in this neighborhoods see themselves represented in the stories. But from that point, I've always wanted, since being in Santa Ana, to do something that kind of starts the inception of something in all 64 neighborhoods, because one of the things that I don't feel like I know about the city is what is every neighborhood and what are they like, and do they have their own histories and are their own stories. And I remember that the library did a project where they did the Rayett Street Chronicles, and you start to understand like these histories of these neighborhoods, and it's amazing. And I even remember in 2013 asking the city for a list of of their outreach, and they literally listed 12 out of the 64 neighborhoods were the only contacts they had. And at that time, I was like, wow, our communications here is not really strong if there's only 12 neighborhoods out of 64 that are really established. And since then, I found out that some of the neighborhood associations that have been around a long time, they actually are full nonprofits. So they actually can even get grant funding for their communities and do all kinds of things. So some of the neighborhoods that are more well established have all these different kinds of resources, and other neighborhoods may not have any. So to me, one of these ways to kind of just begin this thing where people in the neighborhood all are kind of focused on one item and together are building on that, to me, the libraries being everywhere fit perfectly in with the fact that we can't do a book fair this year. So when I got back inspired by Portland, I was like, here's our 64 neighborhood plan. And the first thing that I went to do was to find someone who could build these things. So I started calling all these people. And then I told Robin McNair at the school district about it. And on the call, all of her set designers for the theater were there. And they said to me, wait a minute, we're not doing anything because it's COVID and there's no students in, we're not building sets. So we'll build them. And I was like, holy cow, this is incredible, you know, like this is like amazing moment, kind of synchronicity that they could do that. So I was able to send over funding for them to start and get all of the projects in line. And then the school district helped to put the whole rest of it together. And then we just have been doing outreach, and it's very exciting seeing everybody signing up.
I think that's just the great story. I remember when we first started Makara back in 2016, we really wanted to put a little free, like a cajita over here on the Pacific bike trail. And we just couldn't get it done. It was a lot of, how it is with the city. there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of bureaucracy, and and I knew that we all wanted it done, but we just couldn't break through. There was always some sort of regulation or some sort of code or something, that can kind of prevent, these good ideas from actually taking root. So when you have, those good ideas, and then you have all the right players in place, like where you have like the set designers that are ready to go, and when you have like the funding to be able to provide it for them, you have the neighborhood associations that are all geared up and like into it. And
you have all of the community shuttered at home trying to figure out an idea for the neighborhood. And then all of a sudden it's just like, oh yeah, we can put one in our neighborhood, in our yard. Because that's really what it comes down to, because she said all those regulations, and a couple people have asked, like from the neighborhoods, they're like, can we put it in the public right away? And I said, you know what, honestly, if you can find someone who will establish it in their yard, then we don't have to go through all of that other stuff. So Brilliant. It's been awesome, because that's what people are doing. And we've been making these little congratulations for each of the neighborhoods that are signed up. And one of the very first ones that gave us a call was the Logan Barrio. And what was amazing about that group, which they've been there forever. I don't know if you know the history. You know the history about the Logan Barrio, right, Maritza?
Yeah, we have a book on it in the library too.
Yeah, I mean, that community fought, they were right next to a train track, and they fought to keep their housing because it used to be under kind of a regulation code that said that it was industrial and they were going to demolish the whole neighborhood. So this little neighborhood of sort of legacy, they've been here forever. Families have been here in that neighborhood forever. They've kind of built out this little neighborhood and have like a little park called Shepa Park. And the lady is like one of the elders in the community. She's Mrs. Andrade. And she called and she's like, we want one. And I said, well, do you have a place to establish it? And she's like, yes, because they have a house next door where her son lives. And she's like, my son will put it in his. And they have a group of artists that are all going to come together to paint their boxes. So the next thing about this is we left them so that communities can organically do the art for their boxes to make them all unique for their own neighborhoods. And I'm very excited, and my hope is that all of those folks will actually send back photos, and maybe we can create some kind of a web page that literally lists the neighborhood. And maybe we can even ask them, give us 3 things about your neighborhood that's special, and maybe 3 things that you want for the future in your neighborhood. And that way we can start to have an identity of like a neighborhood identity recognition. So if somebody comes to Santa Ana, they can see every neighborhood is different and they have different goals and ideas and histories.
What has the response been like from the different neighborhoods?
The response has been great. There's some of the neighborhood associations are meeting by Zoom. Other ones are not because, you know, Zoom is a little bit much still. And but they're all, everybody has been very excited to do this. Like, it's a very positive, very positive.
And it's long lasting. I mean, once the festival is over, you'll still have these stewards that are taking care of this library. You'll still have that opportunity for exchange. And
I had one gentleman write in and he said, who's going to regulate the kind of books that are put in this library? And I wrote, and I'm like, you are, your neighborhood is going to do that. You're in charge of your own library. And it's not about anybody else. It's about people will share, you know, and then you can go out and you can make neighborhood agreements around what you think. Like if a whole neighborhood decides, let's just make this for kids, they can do that. They can establish it however they want, but it's just that people start talking about something and they care about something jointly. And that in a way is something that I think is beautiful, because I actually believe that that builds resilience in communities. Mm-hmm. It's that ability to have a neighborhood that's talking about something. Mm-hmm. Oh, and one other little thing that I saw in Portland is that they have something called the village convergence, where neighborhoods, like for instance, you'll take 4 stops in a neighborhood, 4 street stops, and communities have been able to create these like centers for their community where the community converges. And for instance, they'll put a mandala between all 4 streets, and then they'll start to build things around that, including like places to sit. So it just, all of it starts to build out from something being like established, some public art or library or something that starts this kind of energy. And that is the kind of energy that I'm just like, you know, when people complain a lot that they think certain areas of Santa Ana get more attention than others. And to me, I'm like, it is really about people taking agency to create that for themselves. And some people, yes, have more resources because they've developed themselves into an actual nonprofit or other organizations. And other people haven't done that because they're still kind of fragmented and they don't have a center and even a conversation, you know? So
yeah. It's really cool to hear you both talk about this project. And it reminds me of one of the principles I talk about when I'm lecturing about arts. It's find your organic reason. And as you're talking, I hear this rootedness. I hear this placemaking being so organic.
Wonderful time for us. I couldn't be more grateful for this project because we had a collection of about 1,500 circulating titles when we had our space, and we don't have that room anymore. So we have now a smaller collection that's circulating in Makara by mail. Probably it's not going to exceed 300. So now we have this excess of books that we really, really feel terrible about them just sitting in these like really, industrial storage containers. And again, our mission is to provide access, to arts and culture in Santa Ana. So now we have the opportunity with all these gorgeous books that we had in our collection to distribute them all over Santa Ana. And these books—
Tell us about some of your books.
Oh, I have them right here.
Yay.
I will show you. So we have so many art books. One of them is like this really cool book that's a collection. Oh, that's not that interesting, but there's a lot of really great portraits in here. It's for artists that are interested in portraiture and painting and photography. We have books by Isabel Allende. We have books by Rodolfo Naya. We have books for children like Wrinkled in Time.
Nice.
We have so many books that were donated before we closed up, and then books that are now coming in from local authors that are interested in donating, and we're still happy to accept them. And maybe if there's a map available of the lending libraries throughout Santa Ana, that could be a place where people, if there's one close in their neighborhood, that they can add those books into them. I also have to say, like, we have like these coloring books and activity books, brand new. We did receive some donations over the summer, and we've been doing book giveaways while we've been, in quarantine. And we do have a lot of these like really cool books. And I just think it's so nice to like put nice books out there, like, clean and, hardbacks and, new titles, not something like a textbook, from the 1950s. Like, it has to be something that people actually want to read. Cookbooks, again, like our art collection, we have so many exhibition catalogs, really nice books. And for two reasons, we have a lot of them, and also they're very difficult for us to ship. So these aren't books that we want to be circulating, back and forth, but we do want them out in the city. We do want the residents to have access to these like really fun books, to cut up and do collages or to read or to include in their own personal libraries. But I am really excited about getting some of these out there. Like these books, it's like thrillers and, again, activity books and books for kids and books for adults. And if you're into, if you're into collage art, if you're into ceramics, if you love Italian food, like you'll find a little bit of everything in there. And we really are looking forward to putting these packages together for each of these libraries that'll have an assortment and a variety of books, particularly from writers that are in historically excluded communities, where we have a lot of authors of color, LGBTQ community authors, Black, Indigenous authors. We really want these books and these stories to be out there.
That's so beautiful. That's awesome.
Yes. It's funny because I just moved and I have a whole collection. I had a library and I've been like, it's in this storage right now. And I'm like, I really should share these with you so that they can go out into the community too, because I'm like, it's time to minimize, but it's good stuff.
Yeah.
One of the
I'm
things
just excited about, to me, all of this builds towards a culture of literacy. And I just can imagine people really taking pride in the future and in the present with like, where being a nerd is cool.
I totally agree.
like-
Yes, I love that. I love the idea of just, really getting into books again. And just even like if you're, even if you have like these really random tastes, like that's good. That's cool, And we really hope that the more people that are trying out, books that are outside of what they're used to reading, maybe more science fiction, maybe some more horror, maybe that is like totally random, that you just close your eyes and pick a book. And I love that idea of that curiosity and, how you'll intake that story and how you'll digest it and how that can, really sort of impact the way that you work with your community and you talk to your neighbors. And even like if you're an artist, like what you create, or if you're just a creative person and you get the opportunity to see another world. And Absolutely, that especially now, you really just need kind of this different stimulation.
And also, like, you just reminded me that, like, the recognition from reading that there's a lot of narratives and that they're all different kinds of narratives and that there's not one narrative, and that you can kind of start to really, like, the critical thinking portion comes in from being able to see. And one of the things I often get concerned about when I'm thinking about the city of Santa Ana is that I know if people don't have resources to travel the world, then it's amazing to have the world brought to them. And these are some of the ways that I think that we can do that. I mean, our museums, our literature, our the people who come in and showcase art, and the people who are here that get to see that, as well as the books that come in showing so for a kid looking at portraiture in one of those books and going, who is these artists, and then kind of going down that rabbit hole of understanding more about this art world and all these places and things, like, that's the stuff. That's the stuff that I used to sit in the library when I was 9 years old, going through those books, telling me, like, fairy tales of China, fairy tales of Japan, fairy tales of Sweden. I'm like, you learn about the whole world through that.
Yeah, and I think that you also tap into something too, is just that we do have, this main public library, the central library that we have in Santa Ana, and that provides that additional resources, the reference desk, the teen space, help to get a job. And I think that what's really important is that the more people that are turned on to that, to using the public library, either through these boxes or through conversations with their neighbors, I feel like that can create more momentum for us as residents to demand more of those services. Because, again, this isn't like the fault of the people who work there, the librarians. It's really the way that the city allocates its resources. And as residents, we have the power and the voice to be able to demand them to prioritize these types of services, real library services, another, big branch where people can go to teen space and get their reference questions asked and interact with librarians. Because I feel like this is like a gateway, you have these boxes and you have different opportunities to engage with literature and to engage with your own imagination and your neighbor's curiosity and conversation, and all of that is key, and you're right, for that resiliency. I think this is first time that I've like met all my neighbors, because we're all at home and we see each other. Now we check in on each other, and it's like I've lived here for like over 30 years and like, I'm just like barely really kind of having these conversations about, what we're eating for dinner that night or whatever, because now we know that we need each other. And I think that that does create a little bit more power and momentum. And we deserve to have, 4 libraries, full service libraries. We deserve to be able to just walk 10 minutes and be able to access all of this world, and access to free knowledge and free books, and and access to people that are experts in helping us find out what we need. So I just feel like you're right, this is kind of just moving things in that direction. And the more efforts like Boca de Oro, the more efforts that there are of people that are participating in this festival and having conversations about books, and just writers feeling valued and readers feeling valued, I really do think that does create, sort of this more momentum to demanding what we deserve.
It's interesting because as you were talking about the neighbors, I was putting myself also in the perspective of the person who might have a box outside of their house and what they might see over time. Because, if there's a kid in the neighborhood who becomes like a very prolific reader, you're going to see that person going by that box often. So people will start to be able to see in their own neighborhoods who those kids are, and maybe even like plant books, like, like there's all these different ways that it's like so creative that I don't know. I just think it's amazing. Who knows what will come of all of this? But I'm excited, and I'm so glad that I also knew Maritza and could reach out and be like, hey, will you take care of this? Like, and she's like, yes. Or you actually offered it right away. You were
We have a
just
lot
like,
of books.
we'll stock the boxes. That's
You're
great.
both sharing an inspiring story from being rooted yourselves in your community. Because if you didn't know each other, if you didn't know the people who were set designers from Santa Ana School District or Robin McNamara or the other people, all the stakeholders, then the project wouldn't have converged. And as we wrap up this conversation, I think it might be fun if you had a few thoughts for people in the Santa Ana community, or even those tuning in from other parts of the country or world, about the project and what you might want to give them as a takeaway or as an inspirational thought.
I think that for me, it's just that it all starts at home. And truthfully, like I remember hearing a saying that said, everything that you see in your own household, a lot of times that you saw it there first. And then the wider world is just a larger expression of that. And to me, moving out of the house and into the neighborhood is the first larger expression. But when we're connected as neighbors, now we have a larger extended family that's holding us as a community. And then it also creates the sense of safety that when you move beyond the neighborhood out into, the world, I think each of those levels are ways that we emerge, and the way that we emerge can be held, or the ways that we emerge can be very frightening. And I just think that the book is a really cool way within that whole process to start dreaming and to be able to move out and to have the safety of knowing that it was safe first in your community, and then in your neighborhood, and then in your city, and then beyond.
I would just like to, really just thank anyone who is taking the time to learn more about this and really think about how they can start initiatives in their own neighborhood, wherever at, whatever that looks like, but that provides access. Like things, books should be free. Like the library is just a place where you can go and really, really just explore it. Actually, it's the physical space, and I know that that's something that we're all really missing. But there are ways like this, and a bunch of other different things that you can do that really sort of replicate that sense of togetherness and community conversation. It looks different and it requires some creativity. And I just would like to, encourage anyone who's participating in this and finding a way to participate in other initiatives or starting their own if they don't see it, just to start their own. That really was what sort of pushed me to start Makara, is just that we really wanted there to be more access to free literature and knowledge, because it's something that only, strengthens all of us. It strengthens the individual, it strengthens their relationships, and it really does kind of makes more of a creative and imaginative environment for everyone to participate in. All the librarians.
It's so funny. You just made me think we should have something where we get people catching people reading and do hashtag I caught them reading, and we should have photographs of folks reading. Like, it would be so fun. Anyway.
That is a fun project. I can imagine that going around on social media. I caught you reading.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for all of those who tuned in today during this festival. And we hope that you have a chance, if you're in Santa Ana, to explore these neighborhood lending libraries. And thank you today to Maritza Rubio and Madeline Spencer. And enjoy the rest of the festival.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Bye.